I made the art for the game. Like I said before, I made probably 95% of the actual in-game art, if not more. I'm not sure like the exact percent, but I made all the floors, the rugs, the walls, the ceilings, the light fixtures, the Gwen boxes, the doors, just basically all the stuff that you see in the game and interact with was made by me. So like I said before, I made that in my LT and Moto, and I did the textures primarily in Substance Designer. So I'll get a little bit into that, because one of the reasons I want to do this commentary is that I grew up watching, like I'm 30 years old, so I was like of the DVD era basically, and I just used to love hearing directors' commentaries about like all the little details of like how they would frame the shots, how they would get actors to agree to be in their movie and all that. So I kind of figured like there's not that much of that kind of stuff for games. So if there's some game developers out there that are 15 years old or whatever, 50 years old, but just kind of wanting to learn more about making games, figured I could like provide some jump starts of things for them to get interested in. So I'll talk about Substance Designer first, because that's like, if you're interested in making game art, oh my god, pick up Substance Designer. It is so cool. So basically, if you know anything about art, like maybe you know a little bit about Photoshop, you've done some Photoshop before, in that you basically kind of like create layers and draw on stuff. And Substance Designer works in a totally different way. It is very professional software, but you can pick up a copy of Substance Designer for $100. It is what a lot of AAA studios use, but it's priced in a way that if you're an indie or just a hobbyist, you can pick up a copy. There's also, you can get a free 30-day trial, as I recall. So Substance Designer works, it's like a node-based software. So what that means is you basically have, it's kind of hard to explain node-based software like just in audio, but you basically have these different parameters. And like a parameter, like imagine a parameter that's like a checkerboard looking thing, and then you can plug that element into another thing which takes like the information of the checkerboard and then applies some effect to it. And then you take that affected checkerboard and plug that into something else, which then maybe applies a color to it. And you take that and that applies some kind of effect on top of that, or morphs it or warps it or something like that. And what's so powerful about that is that you can basically start with this base idea, which would be your checkerboard, and you can turn that checkerboard into a board of circles, let's say, and then all of a sudden you can have, well, your entire, because that's sort of the base information that's going into your like piece of art that you're making. The entire sequence of art changes down the line. So for instance, a real world example of that is if you look at the floorboards, I could make the floorboards be 20, it's a tiling image, but I could let's say it's 10 wood boards by 3 wood boards. Well, I could very easily, like if you were to do that in Photoshop, you'd draw all those, and then you maybe would decide, oh, actually I want this to be 20 by 4. Well, in Photoshop you'd have to go like kind of manually change all that stuff. But with Substance Designer, you can literally change any of those parameters and have it instantly affect everything else. So one, if you just want to do it non-procedural art, you just want to export out an image file and put that into your game, it makes it very easy to kind of play with different ideas or different scales or different patterns. But then also the next level of that is Unity actually has plugins that allow it to work natively with Substance Designer, so you can create procedural textures, which basically you can in-game, in the engine, change tiles or information about your for your textures. We didn't actually do that for this. There was not really much of a need to. Everything was pretty kind of contained, and it's a bit performance intensive to do stuff like that. But it is something that you can do. And really, from everything I know, and I'm definitely not an expert at game art by any means, but I'm very interested in it and kind of follow the industry a bit. everything is going towards procedural art, and it's Substance Designer is one of the tools, but there are others that are making this push. But the future is going to be, I had a friend of mine who was a really, really incredible artist, and she was telling me, don't 3D model, don't focus, don't desire to be a professional 3D modeler. She was saying in 5 or 10 years, people aren't going to be just like 3D modelers. They're going to be modeling more with software like Houdini while I'm doing procedural modeling. Not that that's like all the 3D modelers are going to be out of work, but more the idea is that the emphasis is changing away from static models and static art into procedural art. So yeah, if you are interested in making game art, definitely go check out Substance Designer, because you just would be amazed at what realistic textures you can create. I think the stuff in Bucket Detective, it's pretty good, but like I was sort of, because I was making all the art, I didn't have the luxury really of spending as much time as I could have making each texture. I mean, I could have put hours and hours into each texture and made it look even more realistic. Basically, like, it's just crazy how with this software you can take a bunch of nodes and turn it into stuff that looks completely real. Because I had thought, before I started learning how to use Substance Designer, I had thought when you see a realistic texture in a game, it's a photo, it's like a scan from real life, but it's actually, they can do all this stuff with just within the software without ever having to scan in anything, which is really cool. Z-fighting. If you look down at the corner of this wall where the two walls meet each other at like the railing, the top of the railing, and walk back and forth, you can see there's that little square there that's flickering. That is known as Z-fighting. I'm sure you've seen that in lots of games before. Maybe you know what it is, maybe you don't, just in case. It's kind of interesting. So now you can look at a game and go, oh, that's Z-fighting. I remember learning about that. Basically what's going on there is you have two objects which are so close to each other, or exactly in the exact same place in the game world, that the game doesn't know which is on top. So it basically is flipping back and forth and sort of rendering them on top of each other. You'll see this also, like, a lot of times, it's not so common, I guess, anymore, but like in slightly older games, if there's a poster that's a poster on the wall, as you get further away from it, you'll notice that the wall and the poster will start to kind of flicker back and forth in each other. Basically what's happening is now, as you get farther away, the way that the game judges depth sort of changes. It's kind of compressing the depth so that something that's a quarter of an inch off of a wall is suddenly, in the math of the game engine, is considered in the same location, or close enough of a location that it doesn't, again, know which to draw on top. And so now when you see that in a game, you can turn to your friend and explain to them that that's Z-fighting, and they will think that you're very intelligent. Oh, and I should also add that when your friend asks you, well, why is it called Z-fighting, you can explain that game coordinates are, in a 3D game, explained with X, Y, and Z. So X is typically left and right, Y is up and down, and Z is typically depth. So it's an issue here with depth, hence Z-fighting. The biggest piece of advice I can give to you, the thing that sucked more of my time than anything, that was the biggest time waster, was that I did not create this game on a grid. I didn't create the art or do the level design originally on a grid. And what I mean by that is that, so Unity doesn't have a built-in grid. So you actually have to, or it doesn't have built-in grid snapping. And basically a grid is, if you imagine the world is just a fluid space with no sort of measurement in it. But a grid basically breaks the world down into units of space. So you have, I think in Unity, 1 unit is like 1 meter. So if you actually create your art and you make like each wall 3 meters by 4 meters or something like that, so that it's exactly a consistent and non-floating point, like non-decimal length and width and height and everything, it's so much easier to make everything snap together properly. So you want to create your art actually on a grid. So like I said, that it's like a 3 meter wide wall, and then you want to actually apply, you want to maneuver the game art in the engine, in the editor, on a grid as well. And like I said, I didn't do that, and I spent so many hours just sliding a wall over 0.1. I'd get these little seams which would appear from like, there being like a half an inch gap between something, or I'd stretch something out on one side and it would disconnect from the other side. So if you use Unity, there's a bundle, like an asset called Pro Builder, that's a big bundle of different types of software. But there's something called Pro Grids, which I think you can buy it standalone for like $10. It's incredibly useful. I wasn't even because I didn't start the project using it, I wasn't even able to go back later and use it. But I will never ever make a game that's not on a grid ever again.